Next on Talk with Claude, we advocate for children's rights and talk radical unschooling with Dayna Martin.
Well, it's interesting because on average with unschoolers, it seems like reading starts between the age of 9 and 11. That's the average age for natural reading. Now that might be shocking for some people, but it shouldn't be, because it's not like your child is starting with age 6 level books.
So there's a lot of fear from people about not forcing children to go to school. You'll often get questions like, how are they going to socialize? How do you respond to that?
That's the first question Dr. Phil asked us.
But it's still out there. I still get
question.
that.
It's funny because it's kind of like the blanket statement question. Like, people ask that without thinking about what it means, and it could mean so many different things. But so there's a few ways to address this. I mean, for one, I like to share about age segregation, that my children are not age segregated like kids in school. So kids in school are taught to socialize with only their age group. If they socialize with older kids, they're rejected. They socialize with younger kids, they're teased. So they kind of stay in the same, really a natural dynamic of being with their age mates only. That's not true natural socialization at all. In fact, my kids have always had a wide range of ages of friends. It's not a question they even really ask or care about, or how old are you? They connect through common interests, which is a much more natural dynamic. So, and also I like to say that children in school, they're in a brick building all day, every day for 12 years. That's not being part of society. That's not socialization. That's kept away from the real world in your own age group. And that is the opposite of what true socialization is. My kids are out, our kids, unschooled kids, are out among society. They're connecting with all different people all day long, and whether it's a grocery store clerk, the librarian, or the 80-year-old woman down the street who they're helping with their yard or whatever, they're very well socialized in that way more than kids in school. So, but the other thing is, people ask what is about socialization in regards to how are your kids going to learn to deal with difficult people, or there's so many different angles of it. What do you want me to address? Which part? So socialization, it is the number one question that parents get. And I think it comes from the assumption and the old thinking of what homeschooling is, that a lot of parents many, many years ago, or if they're parenting for religious reasons, will often want to keep their kids away from society. And so they tend to think of homeschooled kids as shut-ins, that they're in their house away from everybody. But that's not what we're talking about. Unschooled kids are so, my goodness, they have a huge, wide world to choose from. They can choose from people of all different ages, of all different cultures, and be immersed in that. So it's kids in school that I'd worry about socialization with, to be honest with you, not kids living this life. Because it's so scary to be having to sit next to somebody who bullies you and not have the freedom to be able to move and not be in that situation. Our society turns it around and manipulates and brainwashes parents to believe that that's actually good for kids, but they've been lied to. It's not. It's terrorizing, and it affects kids the rest of their lives. My kids always have the freedom to choose who to be next to and who to spend time with, and so do we as adults. If I don't like somebody, I certainly would never sit next to somebody against my will if somebody was bullying me or hurting me, and my kids have that same freedom. I think kids that are conditioned to accept mistreatment are the ones that end up in mundane jobs. They end up in situations where they don't think that they can escape from, because they've been so conditioned to be in miserable circumstances. So I don't want my kids to have that life, and they don't. And so that's a really empowering thing, I think, for parents. And it can be really healing to say you do not need to put your kids in this dynamic for them to thrive. In fact, most of the time they're really unhappy in that idea of socialization. Right, because brainwashing happens to a child in school, and the school has to sell itself to the parents and the child with fear. And so I've seen many times children who are in the system afraid to leave the system because they were told they will be stupid if they do. They're told they're not going to be successful. And so kids are now like willingly staying out of absolute fear, thinking that they don't have this, they can't learn themselves. And so the best thing to do is never put your child in school unless they want to go. I mean, but truly want to go, not staying there in fear. But I mean, because the longer they stay in that system, the more conditioned and brainwashed they are, and it's really damaging and dangerous, and it's affecting the child's future and options so profoundly that parents really need to take this seriously. I think it's first really important for parents to understand that the reason why all kids need to learn to read by age 6 or so in school is because after age 6, after about second or third grade, all the curriculum and reading material needs, the kids need to know how to read to then be taught by one teacher. So it's for the ease of the school, for the ease of the teacher, that children all need to know how to read the written material to be able to follow along, but it's not for the best of the children. Now, there's a huge wide range of reading readiness for kids when their brains are ready to read. And it's anywhere between the age of, could be 4 years old all the way up to 14 years old. Now, there's a 10-year window, depending upon the child. That could be really scary for parents to hear. That's really, really triggering. And I'd say average for natural reading. I don't know what this noise is. Hold on. Might be my daughter's guinea pigs. I can just hear a lot of background noise. Ivy? Oh, okay. All right, cool. She has a lot of animals in there. Sweetie, what was that noise, love? Oh, okay, it's really banging, love, though. Can I help you after? She's packed away all her winter clothes, and she's putting her drawers back in her bureau, which are here. Okay. Totally wanted to do herself. I've never been someone who put winter clothes away. That was like my mother and grandmother did that. And this child is just, she has neatly put away her winter clothes. It's amazing to me. So there's a large window of reading readiness for kids, and it has to do with when they're internally motivated to learn. And reading, writing, and math are all tools to help us get more of what we want in life, like I said before. So children want to learn these tools to help them. Now, if you don't force it and you facilitate it by surrounding your kids with a written word, reading is picked up. Now, one of the greatest tools for reading, which in my experience as an unschooling parent and working with hundreds, if not thousands of families in the last almost 20 years, is allowing them the freedom to use technology. Now that's huge. My children, my son Devin learned to read by playing the game RuneScape, which is an old video game from way back when. My other 2 kids learned to read by playing Minecraft. But not just that, not just playing video games. I think there was other ways too. They really had certain interests, and I would subscribe to different magazines based on their interests. But I think gaming is kind of overlooked as far as a tool for reading, but a lot of unschooling kids learn to read through gaming. That's so fun. Well, it's interesting because on average with unschoolers, it seems like reading starts between the age of 9 and 11. That's the average age for natural reading. Now that might be shocking for some people, but it shouldn't be, because it's not like your child is starting with age 6 level books. I mean, the first book that my daughter Tiffany ever read was a 268-page biography of the band One Direction. That was her first book, and she read it when she started reading it. She was 10, I think, and she read it from cover to cover. So she skipped over. It was completely unnecessary to force all these practices and all these, just the things that kids have to go through to try to get a 6-year-old to read if they're not ready. And then they're labeled dyslexic or delayed, and then these labels stay with them for the rest of their lives. The first book Devin read was a Harry Potter book, and he was 11. And the first book my daughter Ivy ever read, might be shocking to some people actually, and it was when she was 11. And it was Marilyn Manson's biography. That's how we came to meet Marilyn Manson, was she had a total passion for him. But his book, The Long, Hard Road Out of Hell. And it was amazing because I read the book first. I was like, ooh, this is a pretty intense book, I'm sure. And so it was very mature reading, and I let her know. And then my son Devin read it too, because he's very protective of Ivy. And so let's read this before she does. And so we let her know where there was parts in reference to his sexual exploits. And she said, thank you, I appreciate that. She didn't want to read those. She had no interest, but she learned a lot through that and through open communication. So the first books children read, although they might not learn to read fluently until a little bit later than kids in school, they're way above their reading level. I mean, my daughter, that One Direction book was said for 15 and up, and she was 11. Devin, the Harry Potters are for younger kids too, I think. But I mean, Marilyn Manson book was for age 18 and up, and so our kids aren't being delayed. They're not delayed. They're not behind at all. They completely are above the reading level if you would just honor that time frame. Now that is scary for parents to have that trust. If their child's not reading by age 9 or 10, they are like in panic mode a lot of times. But um, it's never ever failed. Every parent that I've worked with, there has never been one child who hasn't learned to read on their own, ever. Never have I heard of it in the unschooling community. Hundreds, thousands of families, thousands and thousands of kids. Not one has been unable to learn that hasn't learned to read eventually. So I think that's really powerful and important to hear.
Well, that to me is certainly something I find encouraging to
Yeah.
hear. But when we compare learning in
Mm-hmm.
school compared to learning the natural way through unschooling, it really brings to mind a quote that I heard a number of years ago. I was following the work of a martial arts master, Taejun Lee, Henry Taejun Lee. He has a martial arts school in California, Warrendo. And in one of his movies, he said, if you want to find some water, you have to dig a hole 10 feet deep, not 10 holes 1 foot deep. And that stuck with me. And I find that represents a little bit how we learn in school. You know, you do a bit of this, a bit of that, not quite enough to be functional at it. You know, you'll learn French, but not enough to speak it fluently. You'll learn some math, but you're no mathematician. And you'll learn some English, but you know, you don't come out there and be all, for the most part, it's not gonna make you a writer. And when we learn naturally, you know, you can really dig in as far as you feel the need to and get that water. I think that's kind of how I see it.
I love that analogy so much. I've never heard that before. That's so perfect. You have to send that to me because that's really, really good. And you're so right. It's amazing to hear it put that way. I've heard so many different analogies about learning, but that is a really, really good one. And you know, if it's out of context, it doesn't work to learn it. You know, like I'm thinking of math, everything is out of context. There's no purpose behind it for the child. And so when you have purpose and a need for this tool, you use math in ways, math I'm just sharing because it's a huge fear for parents also. You know, math, the way the schools teach math are one way. When in fact, one thing I learned as an unschooling parent that blew my mind is, do you know there's so many different ways to solve math problems? There's so many different ways. It's like art. It's creative. Devin showed me a whole new way to multiply. I had no idea you could multiply the way that he showed me. He's like, oh yeah, there's like 2 or 3 different ways to do it. And I'm like, how did you know that? He said, it just makes sense. When you sit with the numbers and you need to figure something out, your brain solves these problems, he said to me. And so we're limiting kids so much when it comes to math, the freedom to explore it and really use it in context. So the same is true for grammar, like you're talking about with writing. Writing is a tool to communicate it, but when it's taken out of context and there's no purpose for a human being other than obeying and doing these worksheets, it is hard. It's hard to learn these tools without your own purpose behind it. So when we give kids the gift of freedom and the gift of purpose, they learn all of these things that we were told are so hard to learn, that you can't learn without force and coercion. It's all lies. None of it's true. We are proving that the whole premise of school is just completely unnecessary, and not only unnecessary, but very, very damaging. So yeah, I get all riled up about this stuff, Claude, I'll tell you. So there used to be magazines about unschooling. Back in the day, before the internet was huge, there was a home education magazine carried articles, but there was also Live Free, Learn Free magazine was one magazine, and what was the other one? Oh, Life Learning magazine. And so I had a poem published about what you're just talking about you know, who would I have been with freedom? You know, who would I have been as a person today? I mean, I love who I am today, and I think that we can appreciate our past and our pains that we've gone through to bring us to where we are, but I often wonder that, and I'm so glad that my kids have always had the freedom to be who they are, and it's just, the world is going to change so much with a world full of children with freedom, so in really good positive ways. So I think a lot of people feel as though they could only live this life if they were together with their partner, But something I've shared recently publicly, and I'll share here, I think it's the only interview I've ever talked to, like maybe there's been one other, I've mentioned it, but so Joe, my children's father and I are separated now. We're actually going through a divorce. And we've been together since I was 15 and he was 17. I'm 46 now, and he is almost 50. And we separated a year and a half ago. Now, there was a lot of reasons why that happened, but basically we grew apart, to put it plainly. You know, we've gone through, he had some control issues and I've had my own issues. And so our childhood issues just kind of creep up on us, and I wasn't in love with him anymore. And so I had to be really honest with him about that. And in doing so, it was quite a journey. But the wonderful thing about it is that we are co-parenting peacefully. In fact, we went to court today for the first hearing for our divorce, and there was a lot of couples in the room, and they were all sitting on separate sides of the court, and he and I were sitting together. We rode over together, and our kids' needs come first and foremost, and we're living on the same property. He lives in an apartment on the property, and I have the house. But we are making it work. So the details of why that was go way, way back. I mean, was married to him for 25 years almost. So I read a really great book about a year ago called Conscious Uncoupling. And in this book, Conscious Uncoupling, it shares the history of marriage. And when people started really coupling up, they were only living until they were about 30 or 40 years old was the life expectancy. And they're saying a much more natural from this book, and I really believe it, is that you have 2 or 3 great loves in your lifetime. And so divorce is more common because people are living so much longer. You know, Joe and I would have never got divorced. We'd be dead by now if it was 100 years ago. Would have been a wonderful, successful till death do us part. But hey, we're a different time in history, and we're living a long time. And you know, it's probably the most positive divorce at this stage that I've ever known. And I'm really, really grateful for that. So we are parenting. So I think that if you are separated from your partner and you're a single parent, really trying to help get your partner on board, you can co-parent even if you don't live in a dynamic like Joe and I do on the same property. So, but if your parent, it can be hard though, because a lot of times parents are together and they might be on the same page with this philosophy. And then they split up, and I see so many times one of the partners just all of a sudden changing their tune just to hurt the other parent. And they say, no, I want the kids in school. And that can be very, very challenging for sure. So this life can be lived with divorce. There's so many single parents. I host conferences like all over the world where, you know, I have, and I am now, I'm hosting one in Australia and then one in the Netherlands, where there can be co-ops for single parents. That's something I've seen really, really work well. But there are a lot of single parents living this life. So a co-op, well, not just for single parents, but it's a tool for single parents. So a co-op is like a homeschooling group, an unschooling group, where parents can switch off childcare, doing fun activities together. You know, if you are separated and you still want to live this life, you can't, because you can. You need to find other people living this life. Unschooling United is hopefully going to be a great resource for this someday. But reaching out to other unschoolers in your area. If you just do a Google search for unschooling in whatever state you're in and then kind of narrow it down to the town, if you can meet up and connect with other parents, they can really help support you on this path. Right. Sure. And I think that parents are afraid if they parent differently. So a lot of times the father, when they're separated, really wants to parent more authoritarian or punitively. That's just much more common. I've actually never worked with a mother who wasn't, well, no, one where a mother was the one that was really strict. But I think parents are so afraid if the other parent doesn't want to parent in partnership. But kids are so resilient, and kids can really go back and forth with the different ways that people choose to parent, just like they do in school with the different teachers, just like they do with their grandparents who are super strict and don't want the elbows on the table. You know, kids are resilient. You can parent in 2 different ways, 2 different philosophies, and still make it work for you. And I think that's important for people to hear, because they might say, oh, my partner is too authoritarian, like this is all going to go down the toilet. No, having one peaceful parent, this is what I always tell my coaching clients, having one peaceful parent, even if the parent is authoritarian and believes in punishments and control and force, is so much better than 99% of our culture who believes in 2 parents who are authoritarian. So your child is 50% way better off than most of our culture, even if just you are parenting peacefully. So you don't need to control and force your ex-partner to be the way you are in order for your child to seek enormous benefits from this life. So I'm here for you if anybody's watching and wants to learn more and wants to connect, because I've supported a lot of people unexpectedly on this path because I never expected to be single. But here I am, single mom of 4 kids. It's crazy, but it's working. And if I can do it, you can. Parents' house. But I think the authoritarian parent needs to feel what it's like for their child, what their child is feeling during that, to really have the motivation to change. Because when you're in that, control your other partner, your ex-partner, into doing what you think they should do through any kind of coercion or fear, control doesn't work. Forced learning doesn't work. So you need to allow the parent, whether you're together, because there's parents that are together in a marriage still who have this 2 different beliefs, whether you're together or separated, honoring the other parent's path, offering resources and support, but letting them walk it themselves, because it's only through feeling what your children feel in that dynamic when they're punished. It's only through feeling that disconnection and what you don't like about it that you can then want something better. So that's really a belief that I've held even when Joe and I were together. So.
So for the people that see this interview and want to find you online and follow you or find your products, where can they find you?
Okay. Okay, great. So I'm doing a lot. You can find me, I think my hub of everything I do is on Facebook. Like Facebook is my page. Just look for Dayna Martin, Dayna Martin. Follow me on Facebook, and then you'll see all the different things I'm doing. And so I'm hosting conferences. I have one in the Netherlands that I post about. I have one coming out in Australia in January. I'll be in Australia speaking. But so DaynaMartin.com, you can find articles and videos. You can find me on YouTube under the Sparkling Martins and watch the videos that Claude was talking about earlier. But email, you can email me anytime. You could find my email through my website. I must be forgetting something. Oh, coaching, parenting coaching. So parenting coaching is like my heart and soul. It's what I absolutely love doing. And so I work on a sliding scale, and nobody will be turned away. I have really reasonable coaching prices, so I don't want money to ever come in the way of helping people that need my support. Company. That's new. This is the first interview. This is the first interview I'm promoting my new business. So I have a business called Indigo Rose, which I just have to share briefly is really funny because, so my sister is a YouTuber, a really famous YouTuber actually, who does Minecraft videos. Her name is Amy Lee 33. So if there's anybody watching who has kids, you probably know who she is. And so I have my own YouTube channel for Minecraft. I only have 5 videos, but my was Indigo Rose 33, and I never really did anything with it. Minecraft wasn't my passion. It was just really fun to do for my kids and to play with my sister and do some videos. And so now I started a business. It's called Indigo Rose. So Indigo Rose is reborn, but now she's a beauty business, and I make something called Goddess Oil. And so you can read more about it on Facebook. So I have a book coming out called Bad Girls Eat Pretty. Kind of a fun name. And it's just a collection of recipes that I've created. I've been a raw food chef for about 8 years now. I have a business called Rock Stars, RAWK. So I do catering, and I'm a woman of all many talents. If you're interested. So yeah, that's all right. Well, thank you so much for having me on today, Claude. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Can we invite you again at some later date?
No problem.
Perfect. And hopefully we go in it even deeper into some of those
yes.
ideas.
We have a lot more to talk about. That was like the tip of the iceberg, guys. Seriously, that was like 1% of all we have to talk about when it comes to this philosophy. So we'll see you again on here soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. You too.